We're in a cave with a young chap whose ears rather suggest he's of the Vulcan persuasion. Some exploring reveals the cave may be a temple, and another, older Vulcan comes out for a chat. We learn from it that we're in some sort of institution for those who reject the value of logic, and that the younger Vulcan's wish to embrace emotion has resulted in him being thrown out by family and school alike. A bit of verbal sparring between them gives us 2 more facts: that the older is a Vulcan master who seems willing to tolerate all of his questions, and that the younger's name is Tuvok. On an arid landscape with what looks a lot like multiple crashed ships, we see a solitary figure walking. There's a flash and a rumble before a swirly in the sky shits something out. The something is a Starfleet shuttle, but at least it's one of the older Type 6s, so Janeway probably won't bother to claim on the insurance. That solitary figure goes for a closer look at what's left, specifically the bits they can nick. As they do, Paris shows his face, only to have a weapon of some sort pointed at it. There's a bit of shouting, but no translation for it. Either his comm badge is busted, or this language is particularly difficult. We don't need words to understand that Paris is getting robbed, though. The case he's carrying changes hands, and the stranger leaves as Paris bemoans his luck. Bad luck is the theme of this planet. As they're scarpering, the robber becomes a robbee, thanks to the attentions of 2 reptilian-looking blighters who knock the first down and grab their stuff. It's bad luck all the way down. The 2 new robbers get their asses kicked in turn by Tuvok, who efficiently dispatches them and manages to exchange names with the original robber. A speaking part, even when we don't understand it, suggests importance, so let's give them a name of our own. Paris's mugger will now be known as... Space Melvin by Ensign Calibos. Tuvok invites them back to his place, though a look at the contents of their bag informs him that this will not be their first visit. Paris is trying to contact Voyager, and failing. Tuvok returns with our guest, explaining that she was attacked by 2 lads and needs medical treatment. Paris obliges once he gets back the medical kits that she'd nicked, and Tuvok offers her food as well. She seems to enjoy it, so they must be emergency rations rather than a packed lunch from Neelix. Just in case the viewer hadn't guessed it yet, Paris makes it clear that this shuttle is super fucked and won't be flying anywhere. The communication system seems to be working though, with Paris explaining that they can't contact Voyager because this planet has a science wibbly going on, presumably the one that also made them crash. And we learned that the away team of 2 was actually an away team of 3. The Doc was with them, but his mobile emitter's been damaged. Tuvok wants that repaired as soon as possible. Having someone who can't be punched on our side might prove useful. We'll have to worry about that later, though, as Space Melvin gets a bit agitated. The reason is a group of those lizard lads approaching, so we grab what we can and scarp her, with Tuvok suggesting that Space Melvin being a local means she has somewhere to lay low. Tuvok's suspicion is on the nose, and it's a pretty good gaffe too, at least by planet shipwreck standards. It's not likely to ever be spaceworthy again, but it has life support and, more importantly, for such a hostile planet, working shields. Now we're somewhere safe, Paris has a butcher's at the Doctor's mobile emitter. A bit of prodding gets him online, though Space Melvin isn't delighted by having yet another house guest. Until he starts talking to her in her own language anyway. He has a translator built into his program, so it looks like the comm badges were the problem after all. Now we have a way of talking to her, Paris wants the Doc to ask Space Melvin how long she's been here, and if she knows how to get back through the sky swirly. The answers are somewhat disheartening. She's been here for years, and none of the crashed ships during that time have ever made it back out again. Paris and Space Melvin return from a trip hunting the local fauna, a rather unpleasant-looking arachnid, as Tuvok is telling the Doc that he should shut down until they're rescued or he's needed. The mobile emitter is a potential power source, and he's wasting it with social activity, especially now that Space Melvin has picked up the basics of how to speak human. Either she's a quick learner or we've been here for a while, the lack of any facial growth on Tuvok and Paris suggesting the former. Space Melvin's taken a bit of a shine towards Tuvok as well, trying to learn more about him, and it's a turn of events that hasn't escaped Paris. They have an evening meal where Paris gets a bit sad about missing B'Elanna, and when done, we shut off the Doc for the night. Once Paris and Tuvok are alone, Paris raises the topic of Space Melvin's interest. Tuvok tries to gloss over it, but Paris doesn't believe he's not seen it, saying he's cold, not blind. Not in this timeline anyway. The other, potentially more interesting timeline where he was blind got erased at the end of Year of Hell, along with all of the other character growth from that story, and yes, I'm still annoyed by how wasteful that was. Anywho, Tuvok says he isn't interested. He's married, after all. Paris considers that fact to be a mere technicality, because Tom Paris is a dick. Tuvok's wife is over 50,000 light-years away, he says, and we're probably never getting off this rock, let alone back to Vulcan. Tuvok's had his fill and goes off to do something else, in this case to fiddle with the distress beacon they presumably took from the shuttle. Paris doesn't know when to quit and joins him, but at least it's to apologise for being an arsehole. Briefly anyway, then he starts being an arsehole again. He says he doesn't believe that Tuvok has no feelings, and that the looks he's been giving to Space Melvin suggest he wishes he weren't Vulcan. The line prompts a flashback. Young Tuvok is still in logic boarding school, saying he wishes he weren't Vulcan. Other species don't have to go through all of this pointless ritualistic bullshit just because they've fallen in love with a girl at school. The Vulcan master provokes him into a jealous outburst, a deliberate attempt to show him how dangerous unchecked emotion can be for Vulcans. Young Tuvok's pissed off by the ploy, but his expression also suggests he's just realised how easily he lost control. Time to visit Voyager and see what they're up to. For them, it's only been a single hour since the shuttle disappeared, and Janeway's trying to figure out what happened. Shaky camera mode is engaged, and Kim tells us a subspace swirly is pulling us in. We struggle to escape until Janeway says some science words, and then we're fine. Looks like we found the hole that Paris and Tuvok fell through, now we just have to get them back without kabooming Voyager. Big screen mode in astrometrics shows us it's a subspace plug hole, and we nearly went down the drain. Seven's able to tell them that the inside of the plug hole has a whole solar system in it, but can't see the shuttle. Chakotay suggests throwing a probe in, but before we can, another ship turns up and sticks a tractor beam on us. By the time Janeway gets back to the bridge, Kim is already on a call with a guy who looks a lot like the lads who attacked Space Melvin back on planet Shipwreck. He thinks he's saving us, pulling us back from the subspace plug hole, so he gets points for effort, I guess. Janeway takes over as he tells us that we should probably get clear of that plug hole until tomorrow. It'll be nice and safe after then, as that's when they're going to close it. She explains that we have people down there, something that our caller doesn't care about. They've lost ships to this thing and want it gone, but he's got no problem with us trying to rescue our crew before it gets sealed, so we'd best get started. A bit of sciencing yields a few conclusions. Janeway's done some reading, and everything she's found suggests this plug hole is a one-way trip. Chakotay immediately contradicts her by saying the probe they launched has been sending back data. Rather a lot of it, in fact, a good 3 months' worth to be specific. There's a time wibbly inside the plug hole that makes their time run faster by comparison, meaning that from their point of view, they've already been in there for a while. So much so that Janeway suspects they've probably already assumed Voyager has left. If it was just Paris on the hook, she might oblige, but Tuvok is down there as well, so we're going to keep trying. At least we know they're alive now, though that's going to change real soon as the swirly is getting stronger. Chakotay tells her that Seven thinks it'll destroy itself soon, and take everything inside along with it. Based on the behaviour of their neighbours, Tuvok and Paris might be dead before then anyway. They were attacked while scavenging, and Tuvok got the shit kicked out of him. We reactivate the dog for treatment, and while he works, he asks how long he's been offline. A couple of months, from their point of view at least. I wonder who's been cutting their hair. The doc completes his diagnosis. In short, painful but not fatal. Vulcans are hardy, and he'll recover. This gives Space Melvin an opportunity to act as nursemaid to an injured Tuvok, complete with mopping his brow. He wakes to her great relief, and she tries to celebrate by rubbing her mouth on his. The affection is declined, Tuvok pushing her away while saying he's unable to return the gesture. She thinks he's more unwilling than unable, a distinction he chooses to dismiss as she rails against his logic and leaves. As an aside, this is the second time someone's tried to woo him, third if you include the alien that was controlling Kez during the episode Warlord. Despite the claims of being committed to his marriage, he's still getting quite a reputation in the Delta Quadrant as Voyager's most desirable DILF. Speaking of Voyager, they're still working on a solution. Seven thinks the probe can act as a teleporter relay to get our people back. Janeway also wants to use it to send them a message and let them know we're still here. Seems like the sort of thing you'd do as soon as you got a signal back from the probe, especially when Tuvok and Paris are running on turbo time, but maybe we've all been really busy. And we're not the only ones, it seems. Kim calls Janeway to the bridge and lets her know we have company. Our misguided saviour is back, and he's ready to close the plug hole ahead of time. A request to wait just a couple of hours so we can give our plan a go is ignored, which feels like a proper dick move to me. He must get paid per job rather than by the hour. Based on an estimate from Seven, they'll be done in about 30 minutes, so we need to get our asses in gear. Back on planet Shipwreck, Tuvok's doing a little meditating, until Paris interrupts him anyway. He says that Space Melvin is getting ready to leave the ship, which is pretty generous when you consider that she was there first, and he wants to know what the fuck Tuvok said to her. Saying that it's because she's being emotional isn't enough, and prompts Paris to give a lecture on how other people have feelings. A veiled comment from Tuvok about knowing what that's like gets Paris's curiosity juices flowing, and, rather than just telling him to get fucked, Tuvok explains about being infatuated when he was younger, and how it almost destroyed him. Vulcan emotions are all over the shop, you see, so he has to control them, though I note that didn't stop the Romulans from making a whole bloody star empire, so maybe it's just a skill issue and Vulcans need to get good. The sky swirly makes itself known with a bit of noise and flashing, so we leave the conversation behind. Tuvok does scanny things, but can't tell why it's having a tantrum, so they scarper, presumably back to Space Melvin's rack. The reason for the Sky Swirly's tantrum might have something to do with it getting pooped at. That other ship has started doing its thing, and they're not picking up when Voyager tries to call. We're ready to give the rescue attempt a go, but we need the targets all together at the distress beacon to make it work. Janeway sends them a message to let them know the plan. On planet Shipwreck, everybody's crowded around a console. The message has been received, telling them to gather around the beacon in 30 minutes to be teleported out. The problem is that the message was sent 8 hours ago, so the doc thinks we've missed our window. Good news though, the time difference, which Voyager has managed to calculate, but didn't bother converting those 30 minutes to for some reason, means the actual teleport time will be in about 2 days. The bad news is that Space Melvin has spotted a group of those lads who tried to mug her and kick the shit out of Tuvok, massing for an attack. One of them runs in with what looks like a storage jar on an empty film spool, but actually turns out to be an explosive. Tuvok says the shield's holding, though Paris thinks that's only a matter of time, and we still have 2 days before getting picked up. I'd have expected a ship-mounted force field, something presumably designed for resisting attacks from other ships, to not worry about homemade pipe bombs with insufficient yield to put even the people near them at risk, but what the fuck do I know? Maybe Space Melvin made it herself out of papier-mâché or something. Back outside the plug hole, that ship's still pooping at it. Seven says we've got 2 minutes till they're done, which is irrelevant when we've given the away team a set time, but I guess it adds to the suspense if you don't think about it too hard. Janeway orders Voyager in closer to prepare for teleporting. The away team still has an hour left from their perspective, and the shield is starting to fail. It's quite impressive that the attackers have kept things up for 2 days, especially when you consider the logistics involved in carrying that many explosives. Space Melvin wants to go and repair the shield gubbins. Tuvok offers to join her and she refuses, saying it wouldn't be logical. The minute and a half Voyager spends linking with the probe they sent through is 40 minutes on planet Shipwreck, which doesn't match the numbers we were given earlier, of course, but let's ignore that for now. Space Melvin isn't back yet, and Tuvok goes to find her. She's still fiddling with the shield gizmo, which is sitting outside of the ship, because reasons. 2 lads are banging on the shield, though we aren't told if they've been doing it for the last 48 hours. The gizmo goes pop and they get in, which must have given them an incredible sense of accomplishment. Space Melvin poops orange at one of them before the other jumps on her. He prepares to do some stabbing, only to get pooped on by Tuvok before he can finish the job. Tuvok grabs Space Melvin and scarpers back to the ship, which is handy as one of those lads has just broken in and attacked Paris. Tuvok poops on that bugger too, and everybody crowds together as they're teleported away. Voyager's taken a detour to Space Melvin's planet so we can drop her off. When Paris and Tuvok arrive in the teleporter room, Neelix is already there talking to her, ostensibly to get a recipe for that spider, but maybe also for a chance to be a nosy, gossiping twat. Paris bids Space Melvin farewell and leaves, but insists on taking Neelix and the teleport operator with him. Depending on your point of view, this is either genuinely thoughtful or one final effort at matchmaking. There's a bit of verbal fumbling at what could have been under different circumstances, but Tuvok has a better way of explaining. He shares brain shenanigans with her, and in doing so, presumably the parts of his past that we've been watching through flashbacks. She smiles and thanks him, now understanding fully. She walks onto the pad and, as Tuvok displays the Vulcan shocker, he teleports her home. Later on, Tuvok's meditating in his quarters. We have a final flashback of him graduating from Logic boarding school, with the Vulcan master saying love will never threaten him again, as we fly away. Does Tuvok love his wife? The things we learn here, the flashback to his youth and the end line that he need never fear love again, suggests not. That raises questions about Vulcan society in general. If there is no genuine affection, then are couplings based purely on logic and the rational computation of a cost-benefit analysis? Are mates taken during Ponfar considered lesser or even distasteful due to their hurried or hormonal nature? That raises even more questions about Vulcan societal mores. Would the end of a relationship carry the additional shame of being in error? Incompatibility is one thing. Having the logic that you use to calculate that compatibility in the first place brought into question is quite another. Do Vulcans stay in unhappy marriages rather than admit they miscalculated? Is there even such a thing as a happy marriage? In some ways, Vulcans are the most alien of the humanoid species we see in Trek. But those conclusions don't match the show of empathy from Tuvok when he shares his mind with Space Melvin. It's a parting gift of understanding, a way of making her know precisely why her affections were not returned. Removing any potential belief that she could have been the reason is a fascinating show of humanity. A little research tells me that the meld at the end was the idea of Tim Russ himself, by the way, and something for which we'll shower him with points. So many writers don't seem to realise that Vulcans are boring when they're just logic, so it's gratifying to see that the guy playing one understands. We've covered before that Vulcans aren't quite as cerebrally pure as they'd have other species believe. We saw some of that addressed in the Season 3 episode Rise, where Tuvok was called out for his disapproval of Neelix because his behaviour was the antithesis of logic, something that wouldn't have happened if Tuvok were as emotionally aloof as he claims to be. This episode offers another example of that behaviour, but also a potential excuse for it. His reaction to Neelix's embracing of all things illogical may not be just a general distaste instilled in Tuvok by his culture. It's potentially because he's a reminder of who Tuvok was and the dangers that came with that. That he probably understands this may even exacerbate the problem. Nobody likes being reminded of their failures. I'm forever pining after more backstory for the crew of Voyager, so episodes like this are generally welcome despite their other flaws. For the reward of learning a little more about Tuvok, I'm willing to ignore them here, too. But before we go, there is something I feel the need to address. Fair warning, kids, if you've had enough of me engaging in mathematical calculations and discussion of the number 47, you can probably skip this bit. I've stuck a bar at the bottom of the screen counting down to the Space Dog skit, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay then, for the three of you that are still here. I know I've been a little heavy on the maths of late, and I know I've often derided the references to 47, though I'd argue I've mellowed a bit on my opinion of those. In fact, I told myself to cut back on those diversions as, by this point, we're just banging a broken drum. However, there are two uses of the number 47 within 15 seconds of each other in this episode. Yes, I timed it because of course I timed it. Those references are the time difference ratio given by Janeway and the calculation result provided by Tuvok. When I heard the first, I sighed inwardly but resigned myself to not mentioning it, like I said, broken drum. But when the second came along, I thought to myself, you know what? If that actually works, if they've managed to get the maths right and still include a pair of references to 47, I won't just allow it. I will actively compliment them on putting in the work, because that would be quite impressive, a demonstration of effort beyond just including a number and calling it a joke. The question, of course, is, does it work? Does it fuck? If it had been completely off, I'd have probably still let it go and not written this bit. The thing is, it's sufficiently close that it suggests somebody worked out the calculation, either partly or in full, and then deliberately changed the end result just to throw in a second 47. Somebody chose to make this script wrong for their own amusement. It offends me on a professional level that somebody was paid to do that. I would be genuinely embarrassed to have my name associated with that decision, and I say that as somebody who just wrote a script with the phrase Voyager's most desirable DILF in it. That's how low the bar I'm measuring this against stands. I was actually quite surprised by how annoyed that made me, so I spent a little time thinking about it. The conclusion I reached is that it's because we just had an episode where I showered compliments on the attention to detail. Whether you like Proton or not, you can't argue that they didn't put in the effort. When you compare those little touches to this, it feels like there's somebody on the team who isn't simply nonchalant about fudging things. They are actively going out of their way to do so for self-gratification. I struggle to see that attitude as anything other than a display of contempt toward the viewer. End of episode.
Personally, I don't think it's all that serious. I mean, okay, you don't have a face anymore, but it's not the worst thing that's ever happened on Voyager, is it? At least you've not had lizard babies with Paris.
Not all that serious. What the shitting hell am I supposed to do with an exposed skull?
I don't know, start an heavy metal band. Look, all I'm saying is you're alive, right? And you're not in pain, right? So, on the scale of teleporter accidents, this is maybe a 3.
A 3? I look like Skeletor fuck Scooby-Doo.
Honestly, it looks pretty banging to me. The sort of thing you'd expect to see on the side of a reasonably priced mug if this channel were being run by someone competent. Anyway, the point is that it's not actually life-threatening, is it? Unless you want to roll the dice again and go through another teleport.
Bollocks to that.
That's a shame. We had a betting pool going for which bit would disappear next. Woof.